Welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about the major Brexit referendum later this week in Britain. Will the United Kingdom decide to remain as a member of the European Union, or will it exit? The decision could also have major ramifications beyond Britain's borders. Joining me now from Berlin is Isabell Hoffman. She is the head of European-wide opinion surveys for the German think tank Bertelsmann Stiftung. And with us too from London is Keyu Jin. She is a professor of economics at the London School of Economics. Welcome to both of you to the show. Isabell, let me start with you. Your organisation carried out this opinion survey among Europeans outside Britain. What does the rest of Europe want?
Well, they prefer the British to stay a member of the European Union. That's very clear.
And what were the findings? I mean, was this an overwhelming desire to stay within the European Union, or were there any caveats to that?
Well, it is a solid majority of 54%, but we have also 25% of people who say, I just don't know what to think about the British question and a possible Brexit. But those people who worry about Brexit and the consequences of Britain leaving the European Union think of economic consequences on the one hand, and on the other hand of a weakening of the European position in world affairs.
Keyu, what kind of an impact would a British exit from the European Union have on Britain's relationship with China? You know, we remember just last year when the Chinese President Xi Jinping was in Britain, he talked about a so-called new golden era of this trade relationship between Britain and China. Will that in some way be undermined, do you think?
Well, I don't think it will be completely undermined, but I think from the perspective of this country, of Britain, their bargaining power, their position in the world, I think will be diminished because the negotiations carried out with Europe, the European Union as a whole, compared to just a single country, there's a big difference. While Britain has been incredibly open, one of the most open countries to Chinese investment in particular, and I think that will continue because there's a lot of heterogeneity between how the European countries receive Chinese money, and the UK has been very open. I think that because the UK exports financial services, we have to think about the role of financial institutions, the fact that the Chinese want to make London a potential offshore center for RMB. All of these things might change slightly with a Brexit. So I think it is hard to say exactly. I think China will still be very welcome towards forging a very close ties with Britain. But from Britain's perspective, its role or its bargaining position would be somewhat reduced. So I think that is the main consideration.
Isabell, one of the leaders of the campaign in Britain to leave the European Union is the former mayor of London, Boris Johnson. He makes the case that the European Union is too big, too bureaucratic, too out of touch. Let's take a listen to some of what he had to say on this.
Let me tell you, there's nowhere else in the world that is engaged in this kind of experiment of fusing countries together to create a superstate, a United States of Europe. It is anti-democratic.
So what do you make of that argument, Isabell? Boris Johnson there saying that the European Union has grown to 28 states. That's too big, it's too bureaucratic, and it's undemocratic. Well,
it's just not true. It's just not true, and I believe Boris Johnson knows that very well. So I'm not saying the European Union is a perfect democratic territory of power, because you cannot really call it a state. It's not a proper state, as Britain is a state, France is a state, or Germany is a state. But first of all, those who are calling the shots today in the European Union are the democratic elected government, the national governments. So there's Mr. Cameron, there is Monsieur Hollande, and there is Frau Merkel. And all the other heads of state and prime ministers. So there's an elected parliament. This elected European Parliament surely does not have the same rights as national parliaments do. On the other hand, the powers of a German Bundestag, for example, are not at all the same powers the French Parliament would have or the British Parliament would have. So there is a difference between the role of parliaments and national states as well. I'm not saying it's a perfect European Union we have. I think we have to improve it. But what Boris Johnson is saying is just not true.
Keyu, what kind of a global impact will a Brexit have? Will the impact be confined just to the United Kingdom and Europe, or will the impact be felt perhaps in other parts of the world as well?
Well, I think that the immediate impact would probably be mostly within the region, not because I think actually a lot of the British firms will have to bear the cost of much more complicated processes. You figure out the origin of trade. All these kind of trade and investment renegotiations have to be built up over. A lot of the cost is actually borne by British firms. I think what could cause potentially financial volatility around the world of a Brexit is because of a more heightened uncertainty of what's actually going to happen and what the medium to long-term impact of Brexit will be on the world economy. So I think that from a financial markets perspective, there is a reason to believe that it could cause a little bit of a chaos. But I think, again, the Brexit for the UK, trade with Europe is most important, but also we have to think about financial services. And again, UK's relationship with the rest of the world, although some proponents of a Brexit, people who support it, believe that UK might just turn to the world. I think that's misleading because, again, the bargaining power without a European Union together backing up Britain would be substantially reduced. And for the country, there's really the most important thing that determines trade and investment is geography, whether you like it or not. You double the distance, you half the trade and investment. So even if Britain leaves, the single most important partner that it has to negotiate with is still going to be Europe. And at that point, the same trade-off between sovereignty and economic benefits is still going to be there, except that Britain's not going to be able to influence any of the policy making within Europe, driving forward the ones that support Britain or blocking the ones that hurt it. So at least from Boris, we just heard Boris talk about a political, social aspect. I think from the economic aspect, when the currency union works well, it does bring about increased trade and investment when it works well. And I think at this point, although we've seen a lot of challenges with the European crises, it remains to be said that all this efforts to building up the economic agreements between all these countries have to be redone with Britain. I just don't see any benefit of redoing that.
Right, Isabell, there are those within Europe, those who support Britain remaining in the European Union, who say no matter what happens, Britain has to negotiate some kind of special status for itself within the European Union. It wants, parts of the treaty, I guess, changed to suit Britain. And if that does happen, what is there to stop other European Union countries from saying, well, we want the same benefit. We want to renegotiate our relationship with the European Union as well. We want special status too.
Well, the British have a special status for a very long time, and they have been willing and have been able to opting out on quite a lot of things, paying less, sharing less powers. It hasn't happened so far yet. I mean, there are the Danes, for example. They have special treatments. The Swedish have special treatments. So it's not as if this European Union is just a one-size-fits-all kind of club where you have to sign when you get in, and then you have to accept everything. I mean, with every step forward, there are negotiations, and the British have been very capable, let's say, of defining their own position and imposing their will, and it has been accepted so far. Nevertheless, I think what they have to understand is, and this is the message that comes out of all the European capitals, is that once you vote no and once you vote out, it's out. I mean, of course, there will be very long negotiations on the way, and at some point, a relationship has to be established besides the kind of member of the European Union. But this is a long way ahead, and as has been pointed out, their bargaining chips will diminish once they move out. On the other hand, if they stay in, I think we have also to talk about are they able or willing to move forward with the rest of the European Union, and if not, what does it mean?